I used to work as a custodian at a middle school for almost 5 years, mostly on the overnight shift, which meant clocking in around 10 at night and staying until the buses started rolling in just before sunrise. At first, I actually enjoyed the job. I liked the quiet, being left alone to clean, sweep, and mop without interruptions. And I appreciated not having to deal with students running through the hallways or teachers complaining about trivial things. But over time, I began noticing that the school felt completely different at night. It wasn't just the silence, it felt almost dead, like the building itself was holding its breath. The floors creaked under my boots, the pipes knocked in the walls, and the lockers sometimes popped open on their own. My mind quickly learned to ignore these noises, but one area of the school I never got used to was the basement. The school had been built in the 1950s, and the basement ran underneath half the building. It was a concrete maze of narrow hallways and storage rooms, with exposed pipes and hanging wires. Some rooms were stacked with old desks, others were filled with boxes of outdated textbooks or broken furniture. The damp, musty smell never left, and the fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered whenever they worked at all. So I often had to use a flashlight just to see where I was going. When I first started, an older custodian jokingly told me to avoid the basement unless absolutely necessary, claiming it was haunted. I laughed, but from my first week, I realized there was something unsettling about that place. About 2 years into the job, I had a task that forced me to go into the basement, bringing up a set of folding chairs for an event. I groaned when I saw it on my list, because those chairs were stored in the deepest part of the basement. Standing at the top of the stairwell, I hesitated for a full minute, debating whether I could ask my supervisor to delay the task until morning, but I didn't want to seem lazy. Gripping my flashlight, I opened the heavy door and descended the steps. The stairwell echoed with every footstep, and when I reached the bottom, I flipped the switch, but only a couple of lights flickered on, leaving most of the hallway in darkness. The smell of wet cement and mildew hit me immediately. I switched on my flashlight and started walking down the hall toward the storage rooms. The first storage room on the left was packed with old desks piled high, and the second room, the one with the folding chairs, was half rusted and squealed as I pushed the door open. Dust filled the air, and the smell of old wood polish made me cough. I bent down and started pulling out the chairs, trying to carry as many as I could at once so I wouldn't have to make multiple trips. I had just picked up for when I froze. From somewhere down the hallway came a soft, dragging sound, like someone sliding a shoe slowly across the floor. My heart skipped, and I held my breath, listening. The sound stopped as suddenly as it started. I told myself it was probably the pipes, or maybe a chair had shifted. I carried the first load toward the stairs, but as I walked, a sudden cold draft hit my face, so out of place it made me stop mid-step. The basement was always warm and stale, never drafty, yet this felt like standing next to an open freezer. I shined my flashlight up and down the hallway, but nothing seemed different. Shaking my head, I set the chairs at the bottom of the stairs and returned to fetch more. Inside the storage room again, something felt wrong. The chairs looked slightly different, shifted in a way I hadn't left them. I brushed it off as my imagination. As I bent down to lift more chairs, I heard it again, a thump, followed by a scraping sound from further down the hallway. My flashlight beam shook as I aimed it in that direction, and I saw a classroom door about 20 feet away cracked open. My stomach dropped. I knew I hadn't touched that door, and the school was locked up tight every night. Standing frozen, my mind raced for logical explanations. Maybe the air pressure shifted when I opened another door. Maybe it had loosened with age. Clinging to these excuses, I hurriedly carried the chairs to the stairwell. Returning to the storage room for a final trip, I felt my heart pounding. The cracked door remained open just enough to peek out. Slowly I called, "Hello? Anyone down here?" My voice sounded tiny in the empty concrete maze. Silence. I stepped closer, flashlight trembling, and pushed the door open quickly. The room was empty, only dusty science equipment and stacked boxes. But then I heard a dragging shuffle from behind me, down the hallway. I spun around, but there was nothing, only shadows stretching across the walls. That heavy, suffocating pressure of being watched pressed down on me. I abandoned the chairs and backed toward the stairs, keeping the flashlight trained on the dark hallway. Every step echoed like thunder. I reached the stairwell, grabbed the chairs I'd left, and hurried up 2 steps at a time. I didn't stop until I was back in the main hallway, gasping for breath and sweating. even though it was cold. I locked the basement door behind me, deciding I wouldn't go down there for the rest of the night. A week later, while mopping the hallway above the stairwell, I heard 3 loud bangs, evenly spaced, like someone pounding on the wall. The mop slipped from my hand, and then the basement door rattled violently, as though shoved from the other side. I stood frozen, gripping the mop, heart hammering, and didn't dare open it. From that night on, I refused to enter the basement alone. If anything had to be moved or fetched, I waited until another custodian was there. I never told anyone about what I heard. They would have laughed it off. But I know what I felt. The dragging footsteps, the chilling drafts, the cracked door that shouldn't have been open. Even years later, thinking about that basement makes my stomach twist. And the dread of being watched in that dark, abandoned maze is something I will never forget.